Hello everyone, welcome back to the best place for the best takes. I'm your host Benjamin Cure. This is the Benjamin Cure Show. Happy New Year everyone. I hope you enjoyed it with your family and friends and those closest to you. I personally had a great New Year's Eve. I was watching college football all day, even when we went out to dinner, Unfortunately for the people around me, I was pretty locked into the games. I was streaming them on my phone. A lot of fun in the college football playoff games. Both were surprisingly close. And I think that's a good sign for college football. And I'll discuss the future of college football in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about the individual results of each game. I want to break each one down. I'm going to start with that Michigan-TCU game. TCU executed their game plan absolutely flawlessly. They knew that they were not going to step into the ring with a prime Floyd Mayweather and say, I'm going to beat Floyd by outboxing him. That's not the way you're going to win. That's not the way that anyone has been able to win. Because Michigan has been perfect all year long. Their identity has been toughness, and they have had a great head coach, Jim Harbaugh, who that is pretty much his identity. That's the culture that he has instilled in Michigan. They knew if they won the game, it would have to be through home run football, swinging for the fences each and every single play, and they did that. They always had a man running a deep route. They always had some scheme, some creative way to get a guy open downfield. And to the credit of Max Duggan, he has really raised his draft stock. I mean, what a performance. I did not expect him to go out there and pick apart Michigan's defense. That's exactly what he did. He had an incredible performance. I don't think he should have won the Heisman, but I heard a lot of people online saying he was definitely worthy of that Heisman finalist, not trophy, but I guess title. He had such a great game, kept them in it the entire time, and he proved even when adversity struck towards the end when you thought, is Michigan going to prove to everyone why they are the better team? Are they going to come back and win this thing? They were able to hold them off. And I think the most detrimental part for Michigan during that game was their defense. Because J.J. McCarthy, their quarterback, and that offense kept on rolling. They did just fine. But the defense, it felt like they were not cohesive. They were not one unit. They were not playing together. They were not focused on the task at hand. They had done such a great job of locking teams down in the second half. I mean, their second half point differential all year long was more than 200 points. I mean, TCU knew that if they were going to win that game, it had to be because they went up and went up early on Michigan. And they did just that because they knew that the second half was not going to be their time to shine, but they still were able to put up massive points in the second half. So TCU really put out the blueprint there for how to beat Michigan. And unfortunately, it's too late, too deep into the season. That was Michigan's last chance to play anyone if it wasn't the national championship game. But TCU, props to them. A lot of talent on that team that has been told all year long they weren't good enough. They weren't nearly as capable or as explosive as other teams. On the contrary, they might be the most explosive team in college football. I felt like every touchdown that they scored during that game was from an explosive play during the drive. The big runs, the big receptions, the long downfield passes, the absolute bombs from Max Duggan. But what a great showcase by them. They definitely have proven that they are a real team, that is a real squad. They deserve to be in this national championship picture. Props to them. And it's unfortunate for Jim Harbaugh, who once again comes up short in the biggest game of the season. And I think he's a great coach, but he's got to take a long, good, hard look at that defense and try to figure out what went wrong. Was it the defensive coordinator? Was it our players? I personally think just by the eye test, watching it once, I haven't watched the game back, but it looked like that defense was just not playing together. They looked like they were out of sync, like they expected to be, we're the Michigan defense. This TCU team's not going to throw on us. They're not going to put any explosive plays on us. They looked like they walked in there expecting to win the game. And TCU had other plans in mind, and they executed absolutely perfectly. Moving on to the Chick-fil-A Bowl, the big one, the 1 seed versus the 4 seed, which I think was the most telling game in terms of how college football has changed. Now, I know that Ohio State only had one loss this season. It was to Michigan, and that's the reason they dropped to the 4 seed. But arguably, they are better than a team, let's say, than TCU was the big conversation. But I think it was very telling. No matter how the seeding played out, the 1 and the 4 seed game came down to the wire. It came down to a place kicker in the final 10 seconds of the game at the stroke of midnight. if that's not a sign of what's to come for college football, I don't know what is. Because maybe I'm reading too much into this, but the college football playoff game, that 1 seed versus the 4 seed, has never been that competitive in my lifetime. It has always been a massive blowout no matter how good the teams looked. Even when Jalen Hurts was with Oklahoma a couple of years back, taking on Nick Saban at Alabama, that game was supposed to be a big back and forth one. If anything, that was going to be the team to show that parity was coming through in college football, and it was a blowout. I mean, Alabama put on an absolute clinic on them that year. I believe that was 2019, 2020. I can't quite remember, but it was a couple years back, and I thought, if anything, most people did as well, that would be the game that showed parity. And it was not. I mean, it showed, if anything, that Alabama was still at the very top of the top tier, and that they were the best team in college football, and that parity was not a thing in the league, in the game of college football. It wasn't a thing within the programs. It just wasn't there yet. Now, you definitely have an argument for saying there is parity in college football, and it couldn't be coming at a better time, truthfully. Because here's the thing. College football fans sometimes confuse me. College football for years has had fans complaining, oh, there's not enough space in the college football playoff. It's the same teams every year. Alabama always ends up winning it, or they win it every other year, and they complain about NIL, and they complain about the transfer portal. Guys, you've been asking for parity within college football for years. This is the way you achieve it. You can't limit 4 or 5-star recruits. That's not realistic. It's companies, for-profit companies, magazines, publications, media websites that are ranking these kids. There's no official ranking website that is done by the NCAA, so that kind of tactic was never going to work. Now, bringing in NIL to level the playing field, allowing teams with big budgets, big alumni, big boosters to, not pay these players, but certainly get involved in the recruiting process and make them feel welcomed at their schools, that's going to level the playing field. The transfer portal. A player realizing, you know what, I don't have a spot on this team, or I can't start now, or my impact is not being felt on this roster, I want to go somewhere else. That opens things up. That makes teams more even. That allows star players from big programs like an Alabama or like another program to say, you know what, Alabama seemed great. It seemed like a very competitive program, but I want to go to a place where I can become a star and shine. Because with the introduction of NIL, whether you like it or not, it is just further proof that college football, just like the NFL, has become an entertainment-first business. It's not a school thing. It's not an after-school extracurricular activity. That's not what it is. It's a business. It's an entertainment business. There are billions of dollars at stake from media rights and television ratings and the Nielsen ratings and fans and viewership and in-game attendance. That's the way it is. And these teams and these players know now, hey, I might have a better chance of team success at this school, but I can build my brand and I can build my stardom better at this school where I know I'm going to start and where I still have a chance to compete for a college football playoff or college football national championship. Because this is the unspoken thing that no one has really said that I think is the most important about the college football playoff expansion coming in 2025, 2026. With the introduction of the expansion, I think it allows players to have even more power in their own recruiting process. Because for years we've had athletes that are, all about winning. And sometimes they go by the wayside in terms of their individual stardom because they say, I'm not going to play as much at Alabama. I'm not going to have that kind of playing time, or I'm going to have to wait 3 years to be able to start because I'm playing with NFL talent in this roster. So I'm going to have to wait, but in the end, I'll still have team success. And this is the team that really is the only one that has guaranteed success in the college football playoff. That's why kids would go to these SEC schools. It was always the powerhouse schools. Alabama, Georgia, it was the way of the world. Or Alabama and not an SEC school, but Ohio State. You were going to the programs that you knew had the best chance of making it in the playoff. With the expansion of college football playoffs, with the transfer portal, with NIL, these players can now look around and say, hey, sure, Alabama's got a pretty good shot of getting in, but you know what? So does USC. So does Oregon. All of a sudden, there are more possibilities and more opportunities for these young people, these young men, to really get out there and say, hey, I don't have to go to the juggernaut and I don't have to wait 2 and 3 years to start. I can make an immediate impact, start building my profile, start building my base of fans, and I can also make an impact on the field. It's the perfect balance, and it's going to be a lot more apparent now with the expansion of college football playoffs and with the free market that we have, which is NIL and transfer portal. And so I really don't understand why teams and programs and even fans who have been complaining for such a long time about the lack of parity in college football, I don't understand why they're not more accepting of the changes that are being made. This is how you introduce parity at a real level that's visible to fans. This is how you introduce it to college football. This is your solution. And I think it is so telling for the future of college football, what we've been watching all weekend, what we've watched all season, how we've seen Alabama be upset multiple times, how we've seen the juggernauts fall, and how even the playing field has become. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a really exciting time for college football and for its fans, and most importantly, the players who are putting their lives and health and careers on the line for our enjoyment. And I couldn't be more excited for us as fans. I couldn't be more proud of how college football has developed in my lifetime. It was starting to lose popularity. It was starting to lose momentum. It seemed like the same teams were winning each and every single year. That has changed. We have now leveled the playing field, and it's going to get even more competitive as the years go on. This was the first year that I really felt that. NFL Week 17 always seems to go by the wayside. Fans start to lose interest, the ratings go down, because at this point of the year, fans know this team's good, this team's bad, and these teams are on the cusp of making the playoffs or not. For example, we saw the Jets lose a couple games in a row. They're now eliminated from playoff contention. But I think there still are some important takeaways from a week like Week 17. I've always found it interesting. You saw the teams that are really trying to build an identity, that are too young, that are too undeveloped to be true playoff contenders this year. But you see they're trying to have some sort of good win and take away from the year. Even if it's not a W on the schedule, maybe it's figuring out what your identity is, what your culture is going to be like, who your stars of tomorrow are going to be. You see that in this kind of week. And you also see the teams that are, despite an ever-changing league, there's some precedence here for some good runs. You know, the league has changed so much over the course of the last 10 years. It's not what it was 10 years ago. And the league has entered a new era in really the last 5 or 6 years. Very quarterback heavy, very weapons centric, offensively powered teams. And, you know, the key defensive positions like pass rush are becoming ever more important to close out games in the biggest of games. Aaron Donald, for example, in the Super Bowl. But I think even though it's a very new era of football, there is some precedent. I look at last year's Cincinnati Bengals and I look at this year's Jaguars and I think to myself, are there some similarities here? Could the Jaguars be this year's Cinderella story? Could they achieve what the Bengals did last postseason? Now, I want to talk about the similarities really quickly. Both teams that started off their season pretty disappointing. A little bit underwhelming. Midway through the year, there were some questions surrounding the coach. Is he the guy? Everybody knew the quarterbacks were capable and that they would eventually grow into their own. We just hadn't necessarily seen that yet. Then all of a sudden, in the second half of the season, when a lot of people counted them out in their own division, when they were seemingly out of the hunt, these teams got hot. They surged back. They became their division leaders. And they showed everyone around them, and really the entire league, hey, we are a team that is not to be messed with, and you do not want a playoff time. Young teams, a lot of momentum, and a lot of energy surrounding them. I think both teams are very similar in that sense. Now, I think this is where the discrepancy comes in. I don't think the Jaguars have nearly the explosiveness that the Bengals do. I feel like the Jaguars are an explosive weapon away from being a true Super Bowl contender. I like Christian Kirk, but realistically, he is a wide receiver too. And I know Calvin Ridley will be on the roster next year, but for the sake of this year, I feel like they're missing that big play guy. They've done a good job of incorporating Zay Jones over the course of the last couple of weeks. He has been running some big, deep routes, and he's had some success with those. I just don't know if when you're playing all-star or Pro Bowl corners or good secondaries that are going to lock you down, I don't know how realistic it is that those big plays will come to fruition. These games are going to be close. They're not going to be blowouts. You're going to need to be on your A game every single snap. And that's where, to me, the Jaguars feel like they're a weapon away. but I still do see them being the potential Cinderella story this year that the Bengals were last year. So it's just something to look out for, something that you should watch out for. I've watched, funny enough, last year I watched a lot of Steelers games. They just so happened to be on my cable package, I guess. They were always on CBS. They were the 4 o'clock game. They were the 1 o'clock game. So I got to see a lot of Big Ben action during his retirement ceremony and throughout that entire year. And funny enough, that was a team that was up and down, and then they finally ended up making the playoffs. And though it wasn't a long playoff run, you still saw them get in. And I realized, thinking about this over the weekend, what's a team that I've watched a lot this year? One that's, I'm not personally a fan of, but I've seen a lot of their in-game action. And I realized this year's team for me was the Jaguars, because I'm in Florida, because I get the Florida satellite. I guess I get their games on CBS. I get their games on Fox. So I've seen the Jaguars play, and I've seen them at their best. I've seen them at their worst. They're an interesting team with a really good quarterback at the helm. Top 10 right now. Could be top 5 in a couple years. I think they're really an interesting watch, and there's something to look out for this playoff series. The NFL season isn't over just yet, but that's not going to stop me from making some predictions as to what's going to happen after the season wraps up. I think the team that is going to be involved in the most conversations this offseason is going to be the Raiders, both talking about incoming talent and outgoing players. I mean, there is a lot brewing in Las Vegas right now. Let's start with the Derek Carr, Davante Adams conversation. Yes, I am grouping those two. Shortly after Derek Carr's benching, Davante Adams was interviewed in the locker room, and I think he said something that a lot of people are just letting go by the wayside. They're not addressing, but I think it is super important. In that interview, he mentioned Derek Carr is the reason that I'm a Raider. He came because he knew that Derek Carr was not a top 5 quarterback, but certainly a top 12 guy. He is one of the better quarterbacks on the upper half of this league, and he can be a formidable quarterback, and I think Davante Adams enjoyed playing with him this year. So with Derek Carr clearly being dealt this offseason in a trade, I can't help but wonder, does Davante Adams want to go too? Is he going to request a trade? I think yes. And I'm going to take it a step further. I wouldn't be surprised if after everything they've been through this year, Davante Adams actually enjoyed playing with Derek Carr. And he says, you know what? I don't want to just be traded from here. I want to be traded and packaged with Derek Carr. Which means there is a team right now that if they have enough draft capital and if they have enough cap space, could potentially trade for both Derek Carr, a top 12 quarterback, and Davante Adams, a top 3 receiver. And that would be just an excellent move for whatever team is getting him. I truly do think that Derek Carr still has plenty of good football ahead of him. I do not think he is washed. I think Davante Adams is arguably on any given Sunday the best wide receiver in football, but for the sake of the argument, top 3. So that's going to be a really interesting move. Now the question is, who has enough cap space and draft capital to pull off a move like that? I think the team that comes to mind, I don't know about their cap space situation, but I think the Jets would be an excellent move. I've talked about the possibility of them, drafting Caleb Williams. The reality is they're not bad enough to get Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is going to be the number 1 overall pick next year. They're not going to lose 13 or 14 games. They can't be the number 1 overall pick. That defense is too good to lose 13 or 14 games, which means if they do get the number 1 overall pick, they would have to trade up. And I just don't know, is the team that's the worst next year going to be willing to give up that pick, knowing how much of a formidable star Caleb Williams already is and how good he can be? I mean, that might be unrealistic. And to put Jets fans through another year of misery, knowing that you can be a good team because of your defense, because of your run game, because Breece Hall will be healthy, I mean, I think it's time to give Jets fans what they want. Get them a winner. If the Jets did indeed end up trading for Derek Carr and Davante Adams, I think that would be an immediate Super Bowl contender. Top 12 quarterback, top 3 receiver, being added into an excellent top 5 defense, elite secondary, excellent pass rush, and a good run game that already has some good perimeter weapons as well. Garrett Wilson is not bad. And it's a team that, I don't know their cap space situation off the top of my head, but they're not paying anyone on defense. They're not paying defense yet, and they're not paying young guys in offense yet. So, and you're not paying a quarterback. You're not stuck in some awful deal like a Matt Ryan contract or a Carson Wentz contract. You're not dealing with any massive cap hits that would prevent you from making a move like that, I think the Jets should definitely consider going after the package deal, both Davante Adams and Derek Carr. I think it's a sure way to start winning, and I think New York fans would be really excited once the season started and once they realize just how good their team can be with that guy at the helm. I think also in terms of incoming talent, the Raiders are a big conversation. I think because of Tom Brady, because of Josh McDaniels and their relationship, coaching together and playing together in New England, I think that's also another conversation the Raiders are going to be at the forefront of. I think the 49ers are number one in terms of destination and team for Tom. I think it's the best case scenario. His family lives there. He's from there. And they also have an excellent team that really just needs to plug in a quarterback to be able to win big. And although he's not playing as good as he's ever played, he's still very formidable. He's top 5 in passing yards. He can still work in Kyle Shanahan's offense. Matt Ryan was an MVP candidate, or he was an MVP winner in Kyle Shanahan's offense. I don't see why Tom Brady couldn't be perfect for that offense. He's disciplined. He's not trying to do too much. He's not trying to hit the home runs. He's going to put the ball in the right places, and that team is just built around him. I think second in that race, though, has got to be the Raiders because of Davante Adams, because of the fact that although I just gave you that entire scenario, he could very well stay there. I mean, he could end up being a Raider next year, day one, and that's a guy that Tom Brady, I'm sure, would love to play with, knowing that one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, Aaron Rodgers, got him. I'm sure he'd like to see, hey, that's what you did with Davante Adams. I wonder what I can do with Davante Adams. He'd be in the same division as Patrick Mahomes, which I think, even if Tom was horrible, which he's not, I think his competitive spirit would love and eat up at him to be in the same division as Patrick Mahomes, to face him twice a year, to have the chance to beat him twice a year. So, a lot of conversation surrounding the Raiders. Also, speaking of Tom Brady, I think now Dolphins are slipping into the mix here with a lot of conversations that are going on behind the scenes, with Tua's availability becoming a problem. I don't know if they extend him. I don't think they should, personally. I think Tom Brady is once again back out on the market. And let's be honest here, Dolphins. You guys already got in trouble over it. You already lost the draft pick. Why not make it worth it? Why not finish the deal that was supposed to happen 3 years ago? I think that's another conversation. But all things surrounding the Raiders, I think they are the biggest and most important team to watch this offseason, because they could have a lot of talent coming in and a lot of talent going out. It's no secret that I love my quarterbacks. My superstars are the best. I think they are essential to winning the big game. I don't think you can win a Super Bowl or have prolonged success without the right guy at the helm. But I am being forced to look at a team like the 49ers right now and say, could this team that doesn't have a superstar quarterback be the one to win it all? Could the 49ers win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy as their quarterback? The answer is yes. I have watched enough football this year from the 49ers with Brock Purdy at the helm to know he's pretty much encountered everything that I need him to. He's been up big and he's maintained the lead. He hasn't collapsed. He's made the right decisions. And now, after that Raiders game, I can also say he knows how to go through adversity, be down, and take back the lead, to be disciplined enough to get his team back into the game. We're not asking Brock Purdy to do a lot. It's no secret that he has excellent talent around him. George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, who's been injured, Brandon Ayuk with some excellent plays during that game as well, and of course Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. The most dynamic talent roster, the most dynamic grouping of talent in the NFL. And I think now, knowing what we know, knowing that he can come back from being down, that he can keep a lead, that he can blow out a team, I've seen enough from Brock Purdy to think under Kyle Shanahan's guidance, he is absolutely a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He can be one this year. I don't see why not. I think the 49ers are built so that they don't have to rely on their quarterback. But if you do, he's hyper athletic. He can get it done with his legs. And he always seems to make the right decision. I don't see him making awful plays. I think he has great pocket awareness. And I think he looks the part. And he has the confidence that I would want to see in my quarterback, even though he was the last pick in the draft. He doesn't seem fazed by any of the noise. He seems like he's really disciplined, really focused, and I think that this could be one of the biggest stories. I've said it. I think the 49ers are going to be the ones to make it to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. I think they are that good. I think they can beat just about any team in the NFC. It's a matter of who are they facing in the AFC, and if the game comes down to the wire, can their defense close it out? Because their defense is their best unit. But I can also rely on a guy like Brock Purdy to make a comeback if necessary, or to lead his team downfield in the biggest moments, because I've seen it. I know the Raiders have a putrid, absolutely awful secondary that I've complained about all year, but a comeback is a comeback, a win is a win. Brock Purdy got it done in the biggest moment. He has shown me every single thing I need to see. He's checked every box off. Brock Purdy can win a Super Bowl as the quarterback of the 49ers this year. With that said, that is all for this week's episode of the Benjamin Cure Show. I hope you enjoyed. I wanted to address some of the themes that we don't talk about nearly enough, some of the narratives that we don't get to talk about nearly enough, and I'm glad we got to address those on this week's show. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, Happy New Year, everyone. Hope you have great things coming towards you in 2023. I know that I'm making some changes in 2023 with this show. You'll see some of them are behind the scenes, some of them are on camera. I hope you enjoy. I hope you get to see how this show grows over the course of the year, and I'm so glad that we get to do it together. Once again, I'm Benjamin Cure. You're watching The Benjamin Cure Show.